We're pleased to welcome Bob Ryan to the Newburyport Literary Festival. The pride of Trenton, New Jersey. He came to Boston College and never left. He's been a Globe sports writer since 1968, with just a quick interruption for TV, and then he came back. He is on a great retired status. He's an at-large columnist. You see his column in the Sunday newspaper, and he basically has a columnist's dream to write about whatever he wants. And he has written over the years about just about everything. At the Globe, he was part of a golden era of great sports writers who set the tone for sports sections in all newspapers throughout the country. Will McDonough, Peter Gammons, Lee Montville, Fran Rosa, Ray Fitzgerald, and Jackie McMullen, and even today with John Powers and other great columnists. And it's good to have Bob still in the Globe. The other great thing about Bob, and you'll read in his book, Scribe, which I recommend, it's a great book. Since 1977, he has kept score of every single baseball game he has ever been to. So if you want to know how many hits Doug Griffin got in 1975 against the Angels in August, he will probably be able, well, not 75, but he will be able to tell you. I ask that you not ask him to check a box score today. You can get back to him, I guess. But Bob has also, and one thing I want to mention from his book, when you talk about the things he has covered, Bob has covered World Series, baseball playoffs, Super Bowls, NFL playoff games, NBA playoff games, Stanley Cup playoff games, World Basketball Championships, College Bowl games and championship games, NCAA basketball tournaments, including 29 Final Fours, college hockey Frozen Fours, golf majors, Ryder Cups, NASCAR events, Belmont Stakes, major boxing matches, the Davis Cup tennis, and a dog show. There's nothing in the book, unfortunately, about the dog show. Bob has been elected to 4 Halls of Fame, the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, where he received the Kurt Gowdy Award, the College Basketball Writers USBWA Hall of Fame, the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association Hall of Fame, and the New England Basketball Hall of Fame. So please welcome to Newburyport and the Newburyport Literary Festival, Bob Ryan.
Thank you very much, and good morning. And so nice of you to come out here early on Saturday morning to catch the opening act for Joyce Maynard. I'm looking forward to that one myself. Question that gets asked is why? Why the book? How did Scribe come into being? And the simple answer is I was asked to write the book. Now, I would be colossally disingenuous were I to suggest that at no point during my time at the Globe, I hadn't considered writing a book, because I think any writer with a requisite ego and maybe even a whiff of pomposity feels that he or she has a story, has some stories, and has a nice story to tell. But I had actually talked myself out of it because I had seen some books written by people that I liked and admired that I didn't think gained the traction that the books deserved. And so I decided, well, Bob, you're flattering yourself, so just don't worry about it. But about 4 years ago, I was approached by an agent named Andrew Blauner. Andrew is not just a sports agent, he's a all-around agent who happens to love basketball. And he had been a student at Brown during the height of the Bird era, and became a reader of the Globe. He's from New York City, from Manhattan, and a reader of mine. And he believed in me and said he really thought I would be worth doing something. So I said, okay, well, I have to wait. I'm not going to do it until after I officially retire, which is going to be from the London Olympics. So he was patient and waited, and after the London Olympics did come and go, and I did officially retire from full-time working at the Globe, we got together a proposal. And so my first stroke of good fortune was having Andrew Blauner enter my life. The second one in this project was that there is in New York City a company, a publishing house called Bloomsbury, and the Bloomsbury editor and publisher, he's the big cheese, is George Gibson. George Gibson and I had worked on a previous book back in 1989, a Celtics book. Actually, that book was more about the photography of the late, great Dick Raphael than the prose of Bob Ryan, but I was the guy who wrote the text accompanying these fantastic photos on the Celtics. Not a history per se, but kind of a celebration, if you will, of the tradition of the Boston Celtics up to that point in time, which was 1989. So George George took the book, which was a great break for me. And George had a strong proprietary personal interest in the book. Now, anybody here that knows anything about publishing, it is not the norm that the editor of the book, who lives in New York, in Manhattan, while you live in Hingham, Massachusetts, comes to your house on 2 occasions to spend a day going over some stuff in the process of editing the book. But this is what George did. We really renewed an old friendship, and that was one of the great benefits for me of the book. So I'm in good hands with Bloomsbury. Bloomsbury has treated me better. This is my 12th book, and Bloomsbury has treated me better than all the others put together, and that's not to slight any of the others, but nobody's ever gotten behind the book. The greatest author's lament, the 99.9% of all authors, all failed authors, and I stress that word because I know very well about that, is they didn't promote my book. Well, I couldn't say that. Bloomsbury and the staff was phenomenal in promoting the book, and I had I was very, very busy in the months of October, November, December, leading up to Christmas. But by the way, it's the writer's, particularly a sports book. It's your dream to have a book that will be in the Christmas season, obviously, and which leads me to point B, which is the second best thing to have, is a book that leads up. And so for all you, it's not too early to order your books for Father's Day now. So keep that in mind. So it was a very different experience for me, as I did lots of radio, lots of TV, did over 100 radio interviews, over 100. And one day, I did 18 one day, which broke the company record, by the way, which was 17 I had set the day before. And this is, and I'm just saying this as just to express my gratitude to Bloomsbury for the way they didn't let this thing sit out there and languish. They were very, very nice to me. Let me tell you what the book is not. And the book is not an angry screed from an embittered old writer telling you all the things that are wrong with sports. I could write that book because there are an awful lot of things wrong with sports, but those books are out there, and I wasn't in the process, and nor is this a book about settling scores or anything like that, because I had precious few scores to settle. That was not the way I went about my business and not the way things transpired. No, this is a celebration of a 44-year career in both writing and in television of somebody who loves sports and want to share some of this enthusiasm and tell some of these stories, if you will, and adventures, and I'll tell you about some of the people that I met. There are 6 personality profiles in the book, 4 on prominent Celtics people: Red Auerbach, Larry Bird, John Havlicek, and Dave Cowens, who is an important central figure in this whole Celtic experience that I had. And there's one on Bob Knight, because I had a very interesting up and down relationship with Knight, as most people do. There's only one. There's no flatline relationship with Bob Knight. And Chuck Daly, who was one of the more intriguing people I ever met, and we became good friends when he became coach at Boston College back in 1969. Anyway. So there's personality profiles in there as well, but there's all kinds, and yet the career, if you will, I'll back up in this way, the structure of the book, and very interesting, anybody's interested in technique and all that. I basically, it was not a chronological book. It doesn't start out, I was born February 21st, 1946, and then I did this and then I did that kind of thing. No, I wanted it to be thematic. And I wanted to write about the different, some baseball, some basketball, some hockey, some tennis, not tennis, some golf, lots of golf, and the Olympics and so forth. And basically, I wrote a book that I dumped 130,000 words on George's lawn and said, go do something with it, And what he did as an editor was masterful. He would take a little bit from that part and stick it in that part, and without changing a word that I had written, but rearrange. That's what an editor does, and he did a phenomenal job. And I was able to actually arrange the book so that it really isn't 2 halves. It's essentially chronological up to 1989 when I become a columnist full-time, and then from that point on, it's the themes. But the way he was able to stitch it together was fascinating. It really is. Now, the one thing that I wasn't sure about when I started writing was, well, how personal is it going to be? You know, as opposed to I have all these professional stories and professional relationships and experiences, but what about background, growing up, and all that? And I wanted to have some of that in there to try to explain, you know, my thought process, how I got to be, you know, get who I am, as opposed to the next 1,000 people. And it got a little more detailed and lengthy than I expected. And I asked George, you know, is there too much of that? As you know, if I need to cut some of this personal stuff out, and he said, no, I think it'll work. And frankly, one of the gratifying things in the response to the book has been people who do appreciate, because they can relate to a similar upbringing. The upbringing is specific to growing up in the 1950s in an eastern urban environment and a neighborhood, a strong neighborhood environment, and what our daily life was like, and and so on and so forth. Plus, and the other aspect of the personal thing that I wasn't sure about when I started was how much I was going to write about my father. My father died when I was 11. But the DNA of the sports thing is because of my father, and it was very instrumental in me becoming, you know, in this type of having this life. And I wasn't sure how much of that. He was very well known in Trenton, although never made any money, but he was very well known. And I wasn't sure. Well, I did some research and actually learned some things about him I didn't even know. So I wound up writing about him, and I'm really happy I did. I'm glad I did. It was important for me to do it, and I think you'll see it was a very interesting man. And I am standing here as, you know, very much a reflection of his great, deep, abiding interest in sports. So process was interesting. This is the first book that I wrote as a retiree, which meant that I had a schedule. Now, when you're writing books, when you have a full-time job, and particularly one that involves travel, as I had, you're writing books on nights, holidays, weekends, and even vacations, and it's terrible. It hangs over your head. It's like a giant term paper that hangs over your head every day. That's what it is, and it's miserable. And most people who write books do not enjoy the process of writing, and particularly under circumstances like that. And I can relate very well to the famous Dorothy Parker line, and she once said, "I don't like writing, I like having written." And I think that most authors nod in agreement that they were reminded of that line. But I was able to keep a schedule, and it made it easier. This is, I mean, I won't say it was easy to write, but it was a lot easier to write than any other book I had ever done. By you know, getting up in the morning and having breakfast and writing, and having lunch and writing, and, you know, and walk the dog, and you know, and you didn't have. I had a schedule, and I actually beat deadline for the one and only time ever. I had a self-imposed deadline because I wanted to go on vacation, and so that was also an impetus. So it was an easier book to write than any of the others that I had written. Aside from that, to tell you, the thing that a couple of things here. People talk about me, and they cite as what separates me a little bit from a lot of my peers, particularly over, you know, as you get older, is the enthusiasm thing. And it's a very common thing, and I observed this phenomenon as a young writer, and it really disturbed me. We're looking at these writers, and some as young as in their 40s, who were jaded and bitter and bored with the whole thing already, and really run out of gas. And they got a long way to go, you know. And I said, I don't want to be. I said, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. And fortunately, I never turned into that guy. And I just was natural for me to keep being interested in what I was doing. And I had to think about this and the why of this. And as I listened to more and more people. And sports writers say the following: well, I don't worry. I never care about who wins and loses, and I only root for the story. And I really much more interested in writing about people. Okay, I think, well, now even people who cover teams, by the way, that can't get emotionally invested in that team at all. And when I covered the Celtics for 14 years, it was impossible not to be emotionally invested, just the way I was. And I had no trouble separating fan from writer. I wanted them to win, I'll be honest. And yet they lost. I tried to write as I hate the word objective. It's preposterous. As fair an analysis as possible. Fairness. Forget about objectivity. That's ridiculous. The bar. Every word you pick is objective. So it's not that. It's fairness that we're talking about. But these people they're very indifferent to the whole thing. Well. I'm not like that. I can't help it. To me, the root of my interest is the games. The competition, and that's what still keeps me interested. To this day, it's the competition. The people, the people, but they all come and go. There's not one person who was prominent in sports when I started in 1968 until today who's still prominent in sports in any way. No, they all come and go, and they all come and go in professional ranks, and they all come and go in the collegiate ranks. But the games remain the common bond for all these people with the game, And so if you don't really enjoy the game, I can understand how you get bored and cynical and jaded if you're not fascinated by the games. So whether you're talking about a major league pitcher or you're talking about a Bulgarian weightlifter, at the Olympics, it's the competition. And so I'm still fascinated by the competition, and it just seems very logical to me, but apparently not to an awful lot of other people. But it enabled me to stay fresh, if you will, and I hope even to this day, in my current writing mode, still be interested in the competition. And as far as writing about people is concerned, I don't think it's that big a deal, frankly. I think that it's to me it's a layup drill. If you are, you have a sense of compassion and humanity and sensitivity and a command of the language, you ought to be able to write about people. It's no big deal, and I don't think. And so I'm proud of the profiles I have in the book, and it's fun to write about people, but per se. But remember, the only reason you're writing about them is that they're involved in some form of this competition, which I find that some people just lose sight of. So anyway, that's the feel I hope that you get from the book. The other thing before I take your questions is talk about one of the great surprises of my career. Certainly when I started, this kid from Trenton, New Jersey, 214 Ellis Avenue, and very either upper, lower, or lower middle. I could never decide which class we were. We split the difference there. I certainly never thought I was going to wind up covering 11 Olympics. I can tell you that. And that's one of the great joys of my column writing phase, the second half, if you will, of my career, the second half of the book, actually, is the experiences gained from both the 11 Olympics and the World Basketball Championships that I was privileged to cover, which got me involved in that world, and I really enjoyed that world very much. And so I think there's some interesting stuff in there about the Olympics, and I really came to enjoy that. It really meant a lot to me. And think about, when you're in the middle, you're in your season, and it's the middle of the winter, and you're covering your traditional basketball and hockey, and now you get this 3-week break, totally different. You get to travel somewhere as a rule, and you have this whole other world of interest out there. It's like a great breather in the middle of the season. And then the same thing in the summer. You're in the middle of the baseball season, getting ready for the football camps, and now you're going off to the Olympics for 3 weeks, and it's a great break, and I loved it, and I really I'm grateful that I had that opportunity. So I hope that shines forth in the book as well. So with that said, I would welcome any questions or observations, and thank you very much for coming. I really do appreciate the turnout. Yes, sir.
Would you prefer someone like a Belichick or a Bobby Knight in terms of illuminating the game for you?
Well, both. Belichick is it's misunderstood by the world at large to a degree because of the way he's been represented and presented here. It baffles me that the beat people don't seem to get it. What I'm saying is this. Yes, he should never show up, really and truly, I mean this literally. He shouldn't even bother to come out after the game. because he's going to be win or lose. And he's not very good sometimes when, in other words, he just doesn't want to dish. He just doesn't want to cooperate. It's going to be the same blah, blah thing. We did this and that, all 3 phases of the game, hear that, Okay, fine. He's no good there. Forget about it. Now, Monday, he's seen the film, he's seen the tape, he's had a little, 3 or 4 hours sleep, whatever. And he's incrementally much better. Now he can talk a little bit more about the game. And it gets better as the week goes on, until by Friday, when they have all their work in, he's more loose and relaxed. And if you push the right button by just talking about football theory or historical comparisons, and he'll do hypotheticals, which a lot of guys won't. He's fantastic, and they don't care about this. They just need their meat and potatoes stuff. Who's injured and who's going to play. And as a columnist, I found him fascinating. And the man loves football, and he wants to share his love with people. The man, undoubtedly is as historically minded as any coach who's ever coached in the game. He supposedly has the largest collection of private collection of football books in the world. If there's a football book published, he gets it, a book about football. And he knows he knows the history of the NFL. He knows the history of college football. And he is, of course, a prodigy. He was a Mozart. His father, brought him into Steve Belichick was the assistant coach at Navy for 33 years, very well known in the football world for all his football camps and clinics. And everybody knew that there was this little Billy, the little kid, was this little prodigy who we had in the film room at age 10, 11, 12. And this is what he was going to do. He knew he was going to be a coach, and he was 10 years old. He was Mozart, and that's who he is. And now, grown up, and he's fascinating. So, in that regard, from a columnist, I found him to be a treasure chest. As a writer, as a beat man, he can be a difficult, not the crack. As far as Knight's concerned, he's perfectly capable of turning on great charm and being, the one thing, and he shares this with Bill Russell, another, very powerful personality. The rules are that they control the relationship, and they control the dialogue, they control the situation. And that's it, they are in. So when Knight wants to turn on the charm, he turns on the charm. When Bill Russell wants to, I'm digressing here, but when he wants to turn on the charm, nobody can be more charming, but nobody can be colder either. Than Russell and Knight. Just you don't know whether you're going to get the F-bombs or you're going to get you don't know what you're going to get if he's angry. But boy, when he's in a good mood, he is a lot of fun to be around. I've been subject, which as I write about, I've been subject to both. I've seen both Knights. Yes.
Have you had a chance to read the book, The Education of a Coach?
Oh, positively. It's really the only thing out there that's, and probably will be unless he ever decides to take charge and do one himself, when he's done. But speaking of a book written by David Halberstam about Bill Belichick, and they were, David Halberstam had the dual entree of A, being David Halberstam, and B, being a Nantucket neighbor, if you will. And so he had an entree. Halberstam, who was, I miss dearly. I'm not going to claim to be an intimate or a close friend, but I was in his orbit, let's put it that way. And it was one of the great pleasures of my life. And my family would love it when he would call, "Hello, is Bob there?" Because his voice started down at his right big toe, and then gradually moved up. And wonderful man. Anyway, yes, I recommend it. You can get your hands on it if you want to know about how Belichick, was brought up with Steve and the importance of his father and all that. It's in there. And he opened up a little bit to David Halberstam, but people often did. In the back.
I have a friend who teaches at Harvard Business School a dual case study of the contrasting coaching styles of Bobby Knight and Coach K. And he brings up the fact that Bobby Knight mentored Coach K.
Yes.
But they've developed very different styles. Could you comment on what you've observed
Yeah.
about their styles and relative effectiveness?
Well, the thing that I learned from one of my real mentors in terms of learning about the NBA was Hubie Brown. And Hubie Brown stressed, and I've heard him speak, and he is truly a magnetic speaker, that the coach, you must be true to your personality. You must be true to your personality, whatever it is. You can't be a phony. The players pick up on and so Knight has never made any secret about the autocratic methods that he was going to use. It's basically like he's like the drill sergeant at Paris Island, and if you can survive it, and once you earn your stripes, you're in his little world forever. Then he's loyal, and it's a whole different thing. But you have to go through an awful lot to do it. Krzyzewski played for Knight at Army. Now think about this. Knight primarily, if you do, from his Indiana days, and then later on that wasted time at Texas Tech, but from Indiana, and the image that you have is from his Indiana days. Imagine him as a 25-year-old, precocious, arrogant, know-it-all coach at the military academy, where they, are used to following orders to even higher degree than any of us are, right? I mean, imagine how hard he could be on them, knowing he could get away saying and doing anything, and they weren't going to fight back. I can't imagine, but that's where he must have been unbelievable. Now, as far as Krzyzewski was one of those cadets. Krzyzewski obviously is his own person, but he is a much different guy behind those closed doors. I mean, anybody will tell you. He's not unfamiliar with the F word, believe me. And he can be very, 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 very tough. But it's his own style. I mean, it's an element. He takes an element of Knight. But I mean, all the great coaches have their own individual personalities. Earl Weaver was Earl Weaver. Tony La Russa was Tony La Russa. Very, very, very different people, but they both got magnificent results. So, but I just find, speaking of Coach K in general, he's the best coach alive, and the idea that a guy can go from coaching the best players in the world and on the national team, and then taking a team with 3 freshman stars and turning them into a national championship team with these 18 and 19-year-olds, the same guy. I find that there's only one person I think that could do that right now in our midst, and that's Coach K. So I admire him greatly for that. But he can. Any of his players will tell you, when those doors closed, he can be hard. But still, there's only one Bob Knight, and he's not going to be throwing any chairs around or that kind of stuff. Yes, sir.
Have athletes changed, or is it how writers cover them that's changed?
Well, the athletes, obviously, society evolves, and we've got social media that has changed so much irrevocably in terms of the interaction. For example, we've got one just today, okay? This morning, the Mets have a pitcher named Noel Syndergaard. He's supposedly the next great thing. He's in the system. And he just got involved yesterday in a Twitter war with a fan. And he wound up insulting the fan, and naturally on Twitter, to saying something about, the fan criticized him for being soft, and he said, you can go back to your pathetic 9-to-5 job if you have one. So he tweets this out. I mean, you can't, please, you can't. Well, I'm saying, this is the problem that Twitter presents for coaches and athletic directors in college, why so many schools are trying to govern the use of the social media by their players. But it's a whole other world that they've grown up in. And so, of course, they're different to a lot of degrees. And what that means at the professional level, the biggest manifestation is that they don't have any real need to interact, to be nice with the media, because the media, they can interact, they can go right to the fans themselves. They don't need the media to act as our whole thing for 100 years was we were the bridge between the fans and the players. And in order to have their story told, their image presented, they needed to deal with us. Well, they don't have to deal with us anymore. It's all started with Barry Bonds. We first started making use of his own website, and now, with Twitter and all, and on Instagram, everything, they can communicate directly with the fans. So if they choose not to, engage in the process, what can you do about it? nothing. So it's difficult. And I'm not just talking about the Marshawn Lynch situations. I'm talking just in general day-to-day and a lot of teams. And they're very different. And they're different. And also, it depends on what sport we're talking about. In basketball, they're very different because the whole way a basketball player is developed now is very different than it was 30 or 40 years ago, where high school was the only significant avenue, and the high school coach was was your mentor, and and there was no. Go back 40 years, 50 years, there was no immediate entry into the NBA. You had to go to college for 4 years, or you had to be out for 4 years. You could not come into the NBA if you had not been 4 years removed from high school. Well, we all know that's all different. They're different people. The whole AAU process, they're talking about people that are made to feel entitled at age 13 and 14. All they know is gimme, 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 shirts, T-shirts, shoes, mostly shoes. The AAU world has corrupted, and the values are different. And here's another thing I learned. It occurred to me 20 years ago. 20 years ago, imagine now. I was at the training camp for the Olympic team, which was in Chicago in 1996. And it occurred to me that this is the first generation of players who more than likely had never worked a day in their lives. And I ran that theory by some of the players, the older players and the younger, And in fact, it was the truth that in the old days, you got a summer job, you mowed lawns, you stocked shelves, you did whatever it was. You played basketball, pickup ball at night. That was your summer. Now, of course, they play AAU ball and they go 12 months a year, travel all over the country. They've never had a job. Well, the funny one was when I went to Grant Hill. And you know who Grant Hill is, of course. And he's an African-American prince. His father was Calvin Hill, and his mother was Hillary's roommate at Wellesley, okay? And she's a high-powered attorney. And he grew up in great wealth and privilege, and of course he turned himself into a great player. But I went to him, and he knew I was talking to other guys, and I went to him, and I said, Grant, do you ever have a job? And he said, oh God, I know where you're going with this. He said, well, there was one time when I went to I went to my mother's law firm for a week, but then I had to quit. So that was, but I wrote this story about, the point being, the value system. How you coach these guys, when they're different, they're harder to coach than the people were 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago. And Rick Pitino wrote me a very nice complimentary letter after the column about, yeah, you're right, blah, 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 and it was interesting. But, man, I talked to guys like, you talk to somebody like Carl Malone, who grew up on a farm in Louisiana, and Carl Malone, he plowed those fields, he baled that hay, he milked those cows, he worked. And he knew exactly what I was talking about. But anyway, I hope that's not too long with an answer. Oh, lots of questions. Okay, ma'am, right here.
Along that vein, would you comment, please, on astronomical salaries in today's sports?
Well, it's a matter of economics. I mean, it's sports. Yes, my comment is it's incredible. I don't know what the ceiling is. No one knows what the ceiling is. It's all a matter of our capitalist society and supply and demand. And it's the same in the entertainment industry, it's the same thing. So I know we have this age-old situation. How can we be paying these athletes? We should be paying our teachers and our firemen and our doctors and our social workers, and it's all true. Well, society's made this choice, hasn't it? I mean, society has made this choice. If people stop watching and stop going, and then, the thing will dry up. But there's not the slightest indication that we're anywhere near that. And just witness the National Football League with all this miserable, awful publicity in so many different ways about football, the concussions and the domestic violence. And did you notice any drop-off in attendance or ratings or interest in the sport? No. So this is the society we live in. I'm part of the problem because I'm part of the process. I'm part of the media propagating all this. But I'm also a consumer. I'm a season ticket holder. I've been a season ticket holder of the Red Sox since '91. Before that, I had season tickets with the Celtics. At one point in time, I could afford them both, but they priced me out. I can't afford them both. No, it's true. And that combined with my wife's diminished interest, we got rid of the Celtics, but we still have the Red Sox. And I enjoy that. But yeah, that's a whole interesting, and it's worldwide, I mean, let's face it, the biggest, most important sports entity in the world is Manchester United. You know, that whole world of international soccer. Check out the transfer fees for the great players and the salaries of the great players in international football, and they make our guys look like they're in the breadline. So, yeah, that's my comment. Yes, sir.
I'm sitting here thinking, I hope he doesn't think he's going to get out of Newburyport without telling at least one Red Auerbach story. And if you could manage to use the words Togo Palazzi in that story.
Well, Togo's a great gentleman, but I'm not well acquainted with Togo. I know Togo more through his friendship with Tom Heinsohn than I do on Togo's merits, but I've met Togo on 2 or 3 or 4 occasions. He's a wonderful guy. He played for the Celtics, he's a Holy Cross grad, played for the Celtics in the mid-50s, for those of you who don't know. And his name was Togo, T-O-G-O, Togo Palazzi. Red. Lots of ways to go with Red. Red, I saw Red in the guise of Red being Red, which I also saw Red the grandfather, and Red the host. Red was one of those guys. If you went to his place in Washington, he's one of those people that couldn't do enough for you. You know, every 5 minutes, you want another piece of candy. You know, would you like a drink? You know, his great avocation, he had 2. He had a hobby, he collected letter openers. And he had this astonishing collection, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letter openers. And the other thing was he was a devotee of Asian art, or as it was in his day, Oriental, but we've graduated to Asian. And he had these beautiful, those great screens, those beautiful screens. His entire apartment, and they had an apartment in a corner of the building, one of those buildings shaped like this, and they bought out both sides of so they had a double view there. And everything was Asian art. Now, here's a story that a third-hand story, but it sums up Red a lot. Told by you get told by Cousy and Heinsohn and others. When they traveled with Red on these State Department basketball goodwill things in Africa and Asia and Europe, and Red loved to haggle. You can imagine he loved to haggle in the stores, the antique stores or whatever you want to call them in Asia. I think it was Thailand. The story goes. So anyway. Red is haggling, and he's explaining to his friend. He said, "See that thing there inside the door?" He said, "That's not worth anything." He said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because if it was worth anything, they wouldn't put it right inside the door." And he knew that. My one little funny Red story at the game. Red. I'm sitting talking to Red before a game. And Red was sitting in his seat, which is near midcourt, and I was kneeling on the seat in front of him, talking to him, and a very beautiful woman went up the stairway. And I looked at Red, and he looked at me, and he goes, "What, you think I didn't see that?" I'll go with that one. Yes, back there, in the blue.
I read your piece about the UConn women's basketball team, and in it you talk about center, the position of center in a way it should be playing. You mentioned 3 guys, Sabonis and Walton and Bill Shumski.
Bill.
Can you elaborate just a little on that?
Well, it's funny. Bill Shumski was a 6'1" center from Hillside High School in Hillside, New Jersey. His coach was Wally Massimino, as it turned out. And I encountered him in 1961. Trenton High School was undefeated, and they ran into Hillside in the state tournament at the game in Rider College, and they got beat by this guy, Bill Shumski. I had never seen a guy. He was a pivot guy. He was a pivot man. He had inside moves. He was 6'1", great leaper. Went on to West Point, where he did the same damn thing in college. It's amazing. He knew how to play the position. Sabonis was a master clinician. Sabonis was, they say I wish I had seen the young Arvydas Sabonis from Lithuania, who played for the Russian Olympic team in '88. And he was Bill Walton with a three-pointer, they said, the young Sabonis, before he got hurt. And Walton, I think, frankly, is the most important player who ever laced up a pair of sneakers in terms of how to play that position. And I really believe that. But a healthy Walton, unfortunately, his health did not, materialize very often in the pros. But yeah, that's interesting. Those three guys, but they all have one thing in common: they mastered the position. They knew how to play that position. It's a dying art. There aren't very many true centers left in the game at all. But interesting to see how these two young men coming into the draft this year, Okafor from Duke and Karl Anthony Towns from Kentucky, they're old-fashioned low-post centers. And I was interested to see, how they develop. Let me just take someone new. Way in the back. No, I'll take them both. Go ahead.
What's your stance on Boston hosting the Olympics? I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, my original stance when I first heard it was, what a great abstract concept. And I love the Olympics, as I say. You'll read this in the book. And I think Boston physically would be, and everything, I think we would be a great site. I think we have the ingredients. I think this whole concept of the colleges, and I think we have what I call the gathering places for tourists that make it an experience that you need these places. We have them. But I'm very skeptical about the money thing. I don't think it can be overcome. I think the people here are wishful thinkers, and I know now they're really loading up. Now they're talking about Larry Lucchino coming on board. I'm just skeptical. I've just seen too much. I've been to 11 Olympics. I know the problems. And so what I say is, if Warren Buffett or Bill Gates would like to write a $15 billion check for us, bring them on. Bring it on. But I'm skeptical that we can pull it off. And I think the way it's off, the image of it, it's not off to a very good start with the idea that they're ever going to get that bid from the IOC. But I know with great interest. Nobody's, they're digging in, and this getting Lucchino involved. No, he's a doer. He knows what he's doing. Now, sir, yes.
Given the growing evidence that Major League fans are getting older and older, what is your view about the future of Major League Baseball?
Well, baseball's the two great concerns of Major League Baseball, and they're somewhat connected. Are one, how to attract more African American fans because of the participation of the game has dwindled significantly, and it's not a game that is being played as it once was by the African Americans because it's all about basketball and football. That's A, and B is young people. Yes, the demographics of baseball are very old, and it is a scary thing. They've initiated different programs. The Red Sox have this thing this year. What's it called? They got this thing on the wall with kids in the title. They're trying. Yeah, they're trying. Oh, they're very well aware of it. It's hard. The game. It's a bang age. It's a video game age. It's not a game that. It's a game that needs some time things to develop. It's not based on speed. It's a thought game. What makes baseball so much fun for those of us who love it is evaluating the endless possibilities and factoring in all the what ifs and that's part of the fun. That's a great deal of the fun. It's not an overtly in your face game as basketball can be or football. No, it's hard. And the competition is enormous. And plus, for all the conventional sports, the meat and potato sports, the biggest competition is the growth of the X Games sports, which are very, very popular. And not to mention the competition just from video games themselves. So it's a very different world. I don't know what the future of baseball, where things are going to be in 30 or 40 or 50 years or even 20 years with regard to that. I know you go to the ballpark, you do see kids. People are taking their kids, at least in Boston. I see that. I'm encouraged by that. But it is an issue, and it's a big one, no question. I'll try. All right, I'm afraid, as I say, I'll be back there yapping away, and I'll be out in the street corner too. All right, let me just, yes, sir, right here.
Mentioned in the introduction about that from the 60s, 70s, 80s was the golden era of sports writing. It was focused on Boston, the Globe particularly.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm also thinking the same kind of thing was going on. I had a sense, and it was probably parochial, that the same thing is true with the broadcasters that we had around here. And when you were hanging out, not doing your job, just something to listen, but you got the chance to move around the country, did you get the same sense that the guys they had here were like amazing? Or was it, oh no, that's really true in every place, and that's what you get used to?
Our people were very, very good. I mean, you know, you grew up with Most and Ned Martin and Ken Coleman in baseball, and I love Ned Martin particularly. And of course, Johnny Most was sui generis. There's never anybody liked Johnny Most. Then first the great Fred Cusick, and then Bob Wilson with that booming voice. But you know, was fantastic, and Gil Santos and Bob Starr. Bob Starr was first, and then Gil Santos, and became the voice of another spectacular voice. We're very blessed. But I do think, that's one of my favorite things, that the Boston have been fed a lot of hype about itself. And now I say that as an outsider. Say, I'm with you, but I'm not of you. I'm from Jersey. My daughter, she's got all the DNA. She hates Peyton Manning. She hated Jeter. That's who that generation. My kid, but not me. So it's not dispassionate, but I'm a wry outsider, observer, and I do think that Boston fans have been fed a lot of hype about themselves, particularly this business about being the greatest sports town in America, because I don't think there is any such thing. Every town has its great strengths and its flaws, okay? And our big flaw, of course, is college sports. We do not have the interest in the big-time college sports that many other areas have. All right, my time is up, and I really thank you so much for this great turnout.